camera. It's the Basement Jaxx. Very fitting song title here. The song title is Where's Your Head At? And that's going to tie perfectly to our lesson today. The Basement Jaxx. I don't know if you're into that type of stuff. You should check them out, though. I mean, I don't know if you guys actually go and check out this stuff that I play for you, but Basement Jaxx are pretty solid, kind of like 1990s electronic, kind of like a techno vibe back in the heyday of electronic music. You should check them out. Basement Jaxx. All right, so where is your head at? Today we're going to take a look at the totality of the mind's behavior. These are the 7 branches of psychology. That's the big heading up at the top. And remember that if it's on the board, it's in your notes. I can't wait. That's going to be like the special moment. Every video, at some point, I'm going to go, it's on the board. It's in your notes. And you'll be like, oh yeah, I got to take notes. So you got the notebook out. Remember, this should be like a third of a page of paper. You might actually, for this lesson, want to put my brain right in the middle of the page because we're going to be having some stuff shoot off in every direction as we cover the 7 branches of psychology. First branch of psychology we want to mention is the biological branch. So there are biological psychologists, and what biological psychologists focus on is the idea that you are born naturally the way that you are, right? Like during the early stages of development, like as a fetus and through all of your early development, your brain is slowly developing and you have all these genes that sort of like gear your brain to think a certain way, and that you have all these like neurons, which we're going to do a whole unit on neurology, and you have all these neurons and neurotransmitters that develop sort of unique to you, and your brain works the way that it does because of these sort of like unique gene patterns and unique neurosystem dynamics that you have going on in your brain. And you're just sort of born that way. Isn't that a Lady Gaga song? Is that a Lady Gaga? I think it's a Lady Gaga song. So baby, you are born this way. So that's a biological psychologist thinking. I do want to present a different sort of branch of psychology that believes differently. So this would be more of the natural, right? Your brain is born naturally a certain way. Then there are sociocultural psychologists. And sociocultural, as I cross out socio for no reason, sociocultural psychologists, they kind of take a different approach. They don't believe that you're sort of naturally born a certain way. They believe that you can be nurtured to behave a certain way. And we'll talk probably in class a little bit more about this nurture argument. Right? Nurtured to behave a certain way. Man, I don't know if I can get away with playing a Dave Chappelle skit in class. It's probably going to be a no. Garrett's telling me, But Dave Chappelle actually focuses a lot of his comedy, which you could watch on your own without me directing you to, of course, because it's probably risque and inappropriate. But as you get older and when you are 18, you could watch a Dave Chappelle comedy skit, and he really spends a lot of time on the nurture aspect of certain racial groups and other groups, subgroups, and subcategories of like social behavior, and how people are really nurtured to behave a certain way. That's sort of where he draws his comedy from. So those are sociocultural psychologists. Let's shift gears a little bit. All right, kind of a unique branch here, evolutionary psychologist. And an evolutionary psychologist is going to believe the following. An evolutionary psychologist, as the name implies, is going to go, hey, well, there's evolution of other things like, Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest, and that our brain is subject to those same ideas of survival of the fittest. And that over millions of years, the human brain has evolved to become more and more fit. And so evolutionary psychologists are going to focus on sort of the slow caveman brain. And then evolutionary psychologists would say that over time, our brain has evolved to have some more, sorry, I totally messed it up, right? A slower logical thought process. And then there's the fast instinctive caveman brain. I misspoke there a moment ago, right? So our fast brain is going to be sort of like the caveman instincts. And our slow brain is going to be sort of our logical processes, right? Where we really like slowly think about something and solve a problem. So we've got a brain that has evolved over time, according to an evolutionary psychologist. Another branch of psychology would be the behavioralists. Behavioralist psychologists would believe the following. They're going to say, you know what? We can't understand the human mind. It's too complicated, right? Like, we'll never be able to get what's going on in here. And you have to kind of keep in mind that when these behavioralists were coming up with these ideas, the idea of like having some of the advanced technology that we have today to see what's going on in the brain, like that stuff didn't exist. Like an MRI machine, that didn't really exist. Some of the stuff that you've probably seen on TV where they can like highlight different colors depending on what part of your brain is working, that technology didn't exist back then. So behavioralists said, we'll never understand, right? We cannot understand the brain. But what we can do, right? We may not be able to understand the brain, but what we can do is observe people's behavior. That we can understand. I don't know what's going on in Garrett's head right now. I'll never understand what's going on in Garrett's head. But I can, as sort of like a third-party observer, watch the way Garrett behaves, and I can kind of like try to figure out what's going on in his brain based on his behavior. So we can view behavior. The most famous example of a behavioralist would, of course, be Pavlov. I just throw this name out there because most people are already familiar with it, even from a young age. This is the Pavlov's dog experiment, where the dog is presented with food and its mouth waters, right? And then the dog learns a certain behavior because of that when the food is presented or when the food is not presented. And that outside stimuli actually affects people's behavior. Okie dokie. And we'll go over Pavlov's dog experiment in more detail. I'm sure in a rush, I did not explain that 100%, but that's one of the things that we can do in class when we're in class together. Let's see, there's humanistic psychologists. Humanistic psychologists, these words are really hard to pronounce. Humanistic psychologists basically believe that people self-realize, right? That we are human, and a human can come to a self-realization and understand that our brain might have flaws, and we can address those flaws and improve our brains, right? Simply by realizing that our brain needs improvement. So humanistic psychologists believe in self-improvement and self-realization, and that any type of self-realization as to why we think the way that we think and why we behave the way that we behave, anytime we self-realize why that's happening, that will lead to an improvement. Okay? Let's see, other branches of psychology, I think maybe just a few left. I have psychodynamic. And these are going to be offsetting ones. I'm going to put them almost like a T-bar chart on opposite sides. Psychodynamic psychologists. And then on the other hand, what's sort of like the equal and opposite is the cognitive. There's the valve. I'm going to just run a little bit long. The cognitive psychologists. Cognitive psychologists believe that we learn our behaviors and that we are conscious of these decisions, right? That people actually consciously make behavioral decisions, right? I've got an option to do this, I got an option to do this, and I'm going to choose this one over here because, gosh darn it, I've thought about it, and that's what I'm going to do. On the other hand, a psychodynamic psychologist is going to believe that many of our behaviors are controlled by what we will call the subconscious. Sounds Freudian because it is. That's another name, right? Like Pavlov. Freud's probably a name you've heard of. The subconscious actually controls our actions, that we have memories from way, way back that we don't even remember, and they're buried deep in our brain, and we don't really consciously decide to do things. Our subconscious sort of kicks in and shoots us off in a direction where we're going to make a choice without even really processing cognitively why we're doing it. Okie dokie. So there are your, I think I got them all, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 branches of psychology. That's it. You got the notes, hopefully in your notebook. And when I see you live, we'll talk about some of the more interesting, maybe discussion pieces revolving around this. Adios.